welcome to WYCD Wicked. That stands for, oh my god, what a shaky camera. That stands for what you can do. My apologies. I thought I set this thing for 4:30, not 2:30. I'm quite sure I was just thinking about when the majority report is over, and so I put that time in and didn't use my mind brain. I just wanted to hang out with you all for a little bit and see who stuck around for an hour. Good Lord, thank you. Let's have a gander. Anticorporatus, hello. Pinkerbell, hello. You changed your thumbnail. I dig it. Mars Falcon, Soul Life, with some great comments. Good to see y'all. I just wanted, the purpose of this stream is just to poke fun at a former president and current criminal suspect. He's in civil court again today. It is his absolute worst nightmare. Ooh. It's his absolute worst nightmare. And that means I'm happy about that. But we also have constantly some rather serious updates surrounding the situation in Gaza. I have to tell you, it's a rare and beautiful thing to see people flooding the streets in support of a left-wing understanding of international politics. It gives me hope for the future, frankly. So, we're going to look at that as well. And because I rushed to get this here, we don't... let me see if this is still live. I don't have this pre-set up. Is this still going on? Yeah. Well, let's look outside the courtroom. This will be our, whatchamacallit. Our leitmotif. We're going to return to this throughout the stream to see if interesting stuff happens. This right channel. Link in the description. I hope I got it there, actually. We'll see. But it's for Now This News. This is the view outside the courtroom. Oh, let's try this. During Trump's civil fraud trial. I keep hoping he's going to bust out and get himself in more trouble. Let me mute this for a moment. How are you all doing? I don't think I've said hi yet. Groove Dragon, Wicked Nation Rises. Associated Press camera. Thank you. Thank you. That's what I was looking for outside the court. Thank you so much. I couldn't figure out if that was a C-SPAN thing or AP or what. I appreciate that. Okay, so folks, Associated Press are the is the group to appreciate most, although I am using the Now This News feed. If you're unaware, this is a not uncommon thing to do in the local news industry. If your local news station is showing a national press conference, it's because they are using a feed of somebody else that's there. Usually somebody they have a partnership with. And the last time there was a situation like that there. Thank you, cameraman. Trump came storming out of the court and got himself in way, way worse trouble. But, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at that. Let's look at something else. U.S. You know what? Why am I Why am I doing this there? I can do this in camera, as they say. Let's look up U.S. protests. Oh, nope, that's London. I mean, I appreciate London as well for doing this. Here we go. Let me unmute that. You want to know if there's hope for the future. Just recall what it was like trying to communicate with people in 2003. And to be fair, Christy Z is mad at me right now because I was approaching the situation with the understanding that the American public was going to act like we did in 2003, 2004. Not so. The kids are all right. The kids get it already. Here is the U.S. public. Until recently, some of the most ignorant human beings collected on Earth. After an incredibly brutal 30 days in a very small chunk of land that the U.S. bears some responsibility for, here's the U.S. populace reacting.
Tens of thousands showing their support for the Palestinian people, taking to the streets in Washington, D.C. The protesters demanding a ceasefire in Gaza and calling to cut U.S. aid to Israel. ABC's M. Wen is in Washington with more. M, good morning. The images were just startling.
Startling indeed, Janae. Good morning. Yes, signs and banners have been left here outside the White House, some reading Free Palestine, others reading genocide. This after thousands descended here on Washington in the latest pro-Palestinian protest. Massive crowds gathered calling for a ceasefire, condemning the Biden administration's support of Israel. Demonstrators were seen on social media trying to scale the White House fence, some spraying graffiti on D.C. buildings and statues. Some brought out Palestinian flags, others fake coffins to the area.
Oh, geez. Well, the media hasn't changed since since 2003. Did you hear the language they were using to frame these people? Let's go back a little bit. Let's listen to what I didn't catch her name. Gwen, I think, said.
Yes, signs and banners
is in Washington with more. M, good morning. Cut U.S. aid to Israel. ABC's M. Wen is in Washington with more. M, good morning. The images were just startling.
Startling indeed, Janae. Good morning. Yes, signs and banners have been left here outside the White House, some reading Free
the litterers.
Palestine, others reading genocide. This after thousands descended here on Washington in the
They descended upon Washington.
latest pro-Palestinian protest. Massive crowds gathered calling for a ceasefire, condemning the Biden and
that little chunk right there warmed my heart. Calling for a ceasefire. Stop the violence. Yes. Thousands called for a ceasefire. Young, old, brown, white, yellow, green, whatever. Human beings. There will be peace on earth when it's run by leftists. If we want to, like, if there is a need ever to simplify complicated situations, if you want peace, if you want progress, if you want humanity doing things that are of use, go left. Go as left-wing as you can. If you want suffering, if you want your life and everyone else's life to be worse, vote for right-wingers. It's basically that simple. It has always been basically that simple.
Administration's support of Israel. Demonstrators were seen on social media trying to scale the White House fence, some spraying graffiti on D.C. buildings and
Ugh, this unruly bunch of ingrates. Ugh. Almost makes you think it's fine to blow up all those civilians because they're so rude. Folks, if and when, and by the way, I will continue to do this, I criticize us for not looking sharp, acting sharp, being rather ruthless and rather superficial in our approach to these things. It is because our opposition always does this. They wait for us to give them one image in a whole movement, one image that makes us look bad, that makes us look, not even BAD, I shouldn't say that word, I apologize, but that makes us look like we can't be taken seriously because we're just a rabble that doesn't think. And then they will say that's all of us. And the real problem we end up having is that because we are in the right, because we are correct morally, we always have the most diverse crowd, and we always will. More people will be able to agree on what's right than will have an idea of specifically how to be wrong. So we will always have a larger group, which means we will always have people doing nonsense like this. If you see somebody spray painting at one of these rallies, stop them and just explain to them, this sets us back. What doesn't set us back is you not doing that, but instead marching with us. Just my 2 cents. But it's not because spray painting Free Palestine is even uncalled for. It's not at all. It's just a tactic that doesn't work because our opposition is dastardly.
Statues, some brought...
Even, let me just be clear, even when they don't know it, I wonder if the folks at this ABC editorial room aren't even in favor of a ceasefire in their heart of hearts. I just know what it's like to be in a newsroom, and the creep of expectation dictates so much of what you do. So much. You want to be perceived as responsible, and your perception of what will be perceived as responsible ends up dictating your behavior. It's fucked up.
Out Palestinian flags, others fake coffins to the area as Israel's bombardment of Gaza has...
Now that one is effective. The fake coffins, yep, that is effective. In a capitalist system, you donating money in the form of buying a prop to leave there is a more persuasive argument.
To more than 9,400 people, according to the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza. Israel has said they aren't targeting civilians and that their goal...
Yeah, sick the dogs on them. Make sure you don't miss any of the civilians in between the cracks of the rubble. Really get them all, huh?
Is to eradicate Hamas after the group attacked the country October 7th, killing some...
I doubt the folks at ABC even understand why the image of a bulldozer bulldozing a building, even as part of a strategic yada yada, will rankle folks. It might behoove us to inform them.
1,400 people, according to Israeli officials. D.C. police tell us at least one person has been arrested for destruction of property and that they're investigating several other incidents of vandalism in the area.
Even if that person was strategically wrong, which I think they were, the person who destroyed property, they're a hero. They got arrested doing something that needs to be done. Speaking of, folks, there's protests all over the place. Uh-oh, that's not what you want. There's protests all over the place. I'm sorry, I don't have links in the description. This is a very casual stream. And we're going to take a break as well because I'm going to let a hound out. But I would definitely recommend joining one of these protests. To be continued. In the meantime, please enjoy this. We're going to talk about it on the other side. This is one of the best conversations I have heard on network television. I just enjoy. I don't agree with 90%. I don't agree with about half of the stuff said here, but I think you'll see what I mean. Here's the conversation.
Trial is underway in New York, and the former president is set to stand trial in 4 criminal cases next year. But there are also 2 lawsuits, one in Colorado and one in Minnesota, that are trying to stop Donald Trump's name from appearing on their ballots. Both suits argue the former president is ineligible to run for office because of a clause in the 14th Amendment known as the Insurrection Clause. This is what the Insurrection Clause says. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid to comfort to the enemies thereof. That's long, but let me just tell you, the lawsuits argue that Donald Trump's actions leading up to and on January 6th, they disqualify him from office for that very definition. Then in Michigan, Donald Trump has already filed a lawsuit himself to block efforts to keep him off the ballot there. Basil Smikle and J.C. Polanco are back with me. Charles Coleman is also here. He's a former Brooklyn prosecutor and an MSNBC legal analyst. Okay, Charles, Donald Trump hasn't been convicted of anything yet. He has been indicted on many things. But I just read the Insurrection Clause, and it doesn't say you have to be convicted of being an insurrectionist, just that you participated. And I have eyes. I think he participated. I don't know.
And I think that's the heart of the issue that we're talking about, Simone. The question is, what is the standard that the Constitution has set forward in terms of establishing whether someone has met that burden as being an insurrectionist or providing aid or comfort to insurrectionists? And because he has not been charged nor convicted, the line becomes far more murky, and that's
It's going to make this a lot less climactic, but I'll just tell you that right there. That line she said was what skewed the way I look at this a little bit. Recently I was saying, like, well, he hadn't been convicted of anything. I don't know if we can yada yada. Like, I don't know if it's worth pursuing until we get the conviction. But she's quite right. It's having participated in, not having criminal charges, not having criminally participated in, even necessarily, but simply aid and comfort. It's not a question over whether or not it was an insurrection, over whether or not it was an attempted coup. It's not. It was classified as a coup right away by organizations outside our country. And if we only care about organizations within our country, okay, people have been convicted for participating in an insurrection. I mean, so it's just a question, did Donald Trump participate? And I'm actually okay with saying, yes, he certainly did. He certainly did.
That's why we are where we are in court.
Charles, listen, you got 1,100 people that have been indicted. 660 have either pled guilty or been found guilty of going into and having an insurrection in Washington on January 6th. Over 600 years of sentences have been dished out. You don't need a conviction. You don't need that in order for this part of the Constitution to stick. And I think it's very interesting because it's self-executing. For example, you need to be 35 in order to be president.
Sure.
You have to be a naturalized citizen of the United States. You have to be born American. So no matter how much I like Arnold Schwarzenegger, he can never run for president of the United States. We don't need to go through the courts for this. We heard the president say that we have to stop the Constitution and cease it because he didn't like the results. We heard him what he did on January 6th. He summoned the mob, as we've seen on the reports. courts, and he's gone and led this insurrection against our Constitution.
So, well, hold on a second, because Basil is a former Democratic Party the chair here. I'm going to call on the chair, Basil. Okay, so hearing the arguments on the table, if you were a current Dem Party chair, I mean, I think you know a little something about getting people off the ballot in the state.
Yeah.
What would you do?
Yeah, a lot of time spent at the Board of Elections trying to figure out how to get people off the ballot. So listening to both of those arguments, this is the problem, because it's not an easy fix. It takes time. And in that time, what's going to happen? You're going to have all of Donald Trump's supporters engaged, enraged, and exacting some kind of retribution, if you will.
Hold on. I don't know that they should be joking, for the record. I don't know that they should be joking about keeping people off the ballot as a Democratic Party chair. I think that ought to be something he at least clarifies what the gag is, because that's not okay, that behavior. But all right, let's go ahead.
Is that something that we Democrats want to be able to engage when we're also trying to pump up the Biden-Harris ticket, and by the way, the rest of the ticket? Having said that, I have this sort of zoom out concern, which is that we're debating whether or not Donald Trump should be president given what he did. I'm also concerned about the millions of black men in this country where we are still debating whether or not they should be able to vote in this country. It seems like there's a clearer line for what Donald Trump did, but not as clear a line in the public debates about restoring the rights of these African-American men. So my point is that the law works differently, and we interpret the law and embrace the law differently for different populations. And I think people.
I got to be honest, I had no idea what the connection was between those 2 points. I mean, I don't disagree, but it seems like Democrat nonsense to me, much like Republican nonsense is to gin up a feeling about an unrelated thing and to try to get you to act on the thing you were talking about based on your feelings on an unrelated thing. But it doesn't matter, because I think we're advocating ultimately for the same thing, which is kick his ass off.
People notice that, they see that. And if you're an African-American saying, look at what Donald Trump has done, and he gets to run for president, I did my time, I can't vote. That is a problem that we really should be focused on.
I would agree. The civil rights attorney in me is never going to not be in favor of talking about restoring the rights of people who have been impacted by the system to have access to the vote. I think that part of the problem when you're having this conversation, I've said this a lot, is that Democrats, quite frankly, have a messenger problem and a messaging problem. And when I talk about that, what I mean is when you're framing the conversation about Donald Trump, democracy, the future of democracy, part of this and everything that you've talked about has to be ingrained and embedded into your message. You can't simply make the message about whether Donald Trump is fit to hold office or run for president. You have to talk about democracy in terms of who has access. And we have done a good job in terms of voting disenfranchisement and rights and redistricting, but we have not done a good job of having that conversation as it relates to returning citizens.
I had a pollster, I talked to a pollster recently, and he has been going around the country specifically talking about this democracy issue in focus groups, which I like focus groups better than the polls, because the focus group people tell you what they really think. Right. And in the focus group conversation, he said that democracy does not resonate well with certain communities and constituencies who feel as though that the democracy has never worked for them in the first place.
That's exactly
and so in talking about democracy being on the ballot, if you will, whether it's Tuesday, this upcoming Tuesday, or next year, they have to recognize that the democracy is currently broken. JC.
Well, yeah, democracy is broken, but you have someone who is running for president who has already demonstrated that he has very little care for the Constitution or democratic principles. We saw it ourselves. We heard it. You don't need to have a trial on this. Now, the question that we have is, are we afraid? And I'm an independent. You're the Democrats here. Are we afraid?
You a Democrat? You know what? Don't answer that
question. Are we afraid of a decision that may upset his base so much that we would look the other way and not enforce the Constitution?
Well, you know who's not afraid? Fonnie Willis.
That's insane.
Right.
That's
well,
absolutely.
That's
in my opinion, is the most important thing to keep in mind. there's a huge problem with terrorism in the 21st century because we have a group of people who refuse to evolve their way of thinking past the 19th century. We have people who haven't even given up on holding slaves. We can't appease the worst of us. We can't make that the guiding light, is to make the most vile human beings in our country pleased. I think a good way to know that we're doing the right thing is that the worst of us hate it. If the Nazis are furious about the state of the country, then you're doing things right. 'Cause fuck them, that's why.
You're talking about the integrity of the institution. And in the same way, I am talking about the same thing from a legal precedent. Regardless of whatever I saw or whatever I believe Donald Trump's responsibility was with respect to January 6th, there still needs to be some articulation by the court to say, here's where you cross the line and where it doesn't matter.
I would say,
Hold on, Basil Schmeichel.
thank you. But I would say, I also say, and this is the concern, because it has to go through the courts. How long is that going to take? And my issue is the more time you spend talking about why we shouldn't vote for Donald Trump, the less time we have to talk about why we should be voting Biden-Harris. That to me is the, and it's going back to this earlier point about the democracy. And if you think about, let me go back and center African-American men like myself, right? Because in this moment in time, if I'm thinking about democracy as a whole, how often in my life do I feel that democracy actually works for me?
Right. So
I want more time, as much time as possible, for the administration that wants my vote to tell me why I should care. And that's
well, Basil Schmeichel gets the last word on this. I will note Andy wrote a very nice, got great questions. We asked none of them today, but this was an excellent conversation. It's also my last panel with 3 men because y'all don't follow directions sometimes, but I appreciate you all for.
I don't like ending it the way she ended it, with a bit of casual sexism. Just toss that in there, sure, spoil the whole thing. But it was a great conversation. You know, you had the more centrist Dem there taking the position of like, oh, how does this translate to making a case for Biden? I think I got the general vibe that that's not the priority. It's not. The idea, though, that I think the more important thing is that the culture has shifted significantly, where once upon a time you would have seen Democrats terrified. I mean, anybody within Democratic leadership at the state level, at the national level, you would have seen them terrified to do anything that might be disagreed with by somebody. That was their version of sticking up for everybody. Is just not ruffling any feathers ever. And essentially then as a result getting nothing done. It's how they stealthily became the true conservatives of the country. And now you have a very different generation in control, and it's a breath of fresh air. They're saying we're going to put forward these motions because we believe them to be true. We believe Donald Trump betrayed the country, and I surely do wish the court would have made it clear already, but it's not on us to wait for the court. It's just not. If it's written in the Constitution that Trump is not qualified, then we need to have that conversation. Wish it would have been had in a court already. Wish it was a shorter conversation. Courts let us down. We're still going to have that conversation. If it turns out they lose, oh well. The old Democrats would have said, well, if we lose, that's it. Then nobody can put forward a yada yada. Nope, we got 50 states. Every one of them should have this conversation. Trump wants to take it all the way to the Supreme Court. Fine. A big part of making sure people do not vote for Trump is to make sure they are exhausted with him. Again, they were exhausted with him in 2020. I think it's important that we make sure that they are exhausted with him in 2024. Let this be the end of Trump. I'm sick of this guy. He should have never been a part of our lives at all. But the way to get rid of him is to make it clear who he is until people are sick of talking about him. Y'all, I'm so sorry that we're having an abridged stream today. I have got other hounds to take out. I should have double-checked the time, but I got to go be a good hound watcher. Thank you for joining me. This has been WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do.